Yay. All right, we're recording once again. We are not live technically, but we're recording. And this is Sam, your pop archivist, back with another episode. And today I am joined by one of my bestest friends in the whole wide world, one of the longest friendships, I suppose, in the whole wide world. My friend and yours, Cara Bertram. Yay! Hello, Cara. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. But to be clear, I'm Sam's friend, but I'm not your friend.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Intros are weird where you want to make it sound exciting and enthusiastic, and then you're like, no, Cara's not your friend. She's my friend. And if she is your friend, then and I haven't met you yet, that's weird.
Mm-hmm. Pretty weird.
Kind of a big deal in these circles. But we are here to talk about a subject that Cara and I both is near and dear to our hearts, because one of the many reasons we became friends, not just Batman, which we talked about quite extensively when we met in college, but also The Simpsons, which is a favorite of ours, a favorite pastime, mostly because when we were becoming friends, we not only shared that love of The Simpsons and Futurama, but once you had gone off to, I think, your internship in Montana, I believe it was, or it was just a job post-graduation.
Yeah, job, contract position.
Yeah, you were in Montana. And in order to keep in touch and to keep the friendship alive, we would exchange Simpsons quotes and Futurama quotes with each other. It was like for a long time, it was many quotes, many days. And then it started getting to the point where we were just reusing the same quotes. So it became like one or two a day.
Now we just talk regularly, so
yeah,
like adults.
Yeah, now it's just, oh, hey, I miss you. We should get on the phone or the Zoom thing and talk to each other like real people do. I don't know.
Yeah.
But to be fair, it was a very good way of keeping in touch with someone without like extensively having to be on the phone with them, because other than doing these like Zoom calls like every once in a while, like phone conversations like give me a form of anxiety. So I was like, instead of calling Cara, I'll just send her a Simpsons quote. That means I've performed my friendship for the day. Huzzah me.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure half the reason why I hired one of my graduate assistants is because before he became my assistant, I randomly said, dental plan, and he finished it with, Lisa needs braces.
That's the sure sign of someone you should hire, is basically just Simpsons quotes. I had a teacher in high school. He was my chemistry teacher, and I took AP Chem with him as well. And he loved quoting The Simpsons. Like that was his deal, his thing. And I remember going back to my high school for like a visit for whatever reason it was, because I can't let go of the past. I don't know. And I went to his classroom and was just kind of like observing. He was just kind of like, hey, she graduated and she's still alive and everything. Look at this. And he asked me for a Simpsons question to put up on the board as a bonus question for the class for like his quizzes. A bonus question would always be a Simpsons quiz. Which was great because I dominated in this field. And I think I used Mr. Burns's boat from, I don't remember what the actual episode was, but the boat was called Gone Fission. And even he was like, oh, I don't remember what that boat's name was. Like, gotcha, right there. So suffice it to say, The Simpsons has been a big part of my life. I believe been a big part of yours as well, Cara.
Yeah, I just binged the entire series during my pregnancy.
Yeah.
So that was from season 1 to whichever season they left off at on Disney Plus, which is
like 35 or something.
Yeah.
The longest like thing ever. I remember that there was a actual show of The Simpsons where they made fun of the fact that they would just keep going, that there's no way that Fox would ever cancel them. And it turns out to have been prophetic, like
Yes.
literally everything else in The Simpsons.
Yes. Some things they unfortunately got right.
Yeah, I mean, given the amount of episodes, I feel like the law of big numbers just says that would happen eventually. Like Nostradamus doesn't always get it right, but he got it right enough times.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that The Simpsons and their writers are prophets and oracles, and we should worship them as such. Join me in this new religion that I've created. I actually do have my little Kang and or Kodos figurine. I think you got this for me.
I might have.
Yeah. I feel like this is one of those many like gag like Christmas gifts that you got me at one point. Which very well could have happened. But yeah, it's I choose to believe that this is Kodos because in this house we vote Kodos. Just saying. But yeah, so I'm gonna start off with a little softball question here. Cara, do you have an actual favorite episode of The Simpsons?
I think my favorite episode of The Simpsons is a lot of people's favorite episode of The Simpsons, and that's You Only Move Twice. Hank Scorpio. Yeah.
Good old Hank. Like so many memes have come out of him. Just then was that? Go ahead.
It's just, you know, it's a very classic episode, or but it's also very out there just because of I can't remember the actor's name, who does Hank Scorpio's voice.
Albert Brooks, I believe it's Albert Brooks.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, he's just like out there, like I know that he like ad-libbed so many of his lines, and it's just kind of like this craziness that just came out of his brain.
Yeah.
That they were able to use for the episode, and just seeing Homer like actually good at his job, and
that I think that's
excelling.
That's the clue that keeps you going like, oh wait, something isn't right here, because Homer's competent.
Yeah.
And everyone else is miserable.
Yeah. But it kind of, it loops back to that, ultimately Homer loves his family more than anything. So
that's very
even though he loves his job and he's doing well, and he got another story on his house because he took down James Bond.
Yep. But the thing about The Simpsons, especially like because we're talking, especially today with the two episodes we're going to be primarily looking at, we're talking about what's considered the first golden age of The Simpsons. So which you're so like season one, well, it's not even season one, it doesn't really start picking up, I think, for a golden age until about season 3 or 4.
Yeah, about 3. Yeah.
And then goes to, that's where your mileage may vary. I feel like it's anywhere from like 10 to 15, maybe. A lot of people kind of move that goalpost depending on when they stopped watching The Simpsons, essentially. But that You Only Move Twice is such a good example of just like classic golden age Simpsons, where it's just a joke a minute practically, and then it gets so out there in this weird way, but it's also so grounded in The Simpsons as a family that you will buy the craziness just occurring around them. Because when it gets into that James Bond section, it's just like, okay.
When he blows up a bridge.
Yeah, I mean, it's so ridiculous, because it does such a good job of setting up as this really like, okay, Homer got a new job, his boss is just overly friendly and kind, and then it just moves into like increasingly weirder territory. And then just culminates in the whole James Bond bit where you're just like, yep, okay. I buy it. I'm cool with it. Or like the standard, which country do you hate more, like Italy or France?
France.
No one ever picks Italy. And why would you? My ancestors would be so unhappy about that. Cool. Yeah, no, I love that episode. I didn't even think about that, because mine, I'm sure I've probably told you this, but mine is Cape Fear.
Yeah, that is a really good one. That's a really strong one.
Yeah,
That one was written by Conan O'Brien.
yeah, primarily.
Hmm.
And I think because you had DVDs for The Simpsons.
Hmm.
And I think even when you went to Montana, you gave me like season 5, or it was one of your trips. You went somewhere, you gave me season 5 because that's where Cape Fear is.
Yeah.
And then I watched it, and then I watched the whole season with the commentaries.
Hmm.
Because I think Conan O'Brien is in those commentaries occasionally.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
he calls in for some of the ones that he did.
yeah. And what I love about those commentaries is just getting to like especially because the writers, it's such a writer's medium for that show. And Cape Fear has some of, I mean, just my favorite jokes in the entire history
Hmm.
of The Simpsons with, that's one of those that also my mother enjoyed a lot. My mom used to watch The Simpsons with us when we were growing up, which was great because I didn't have to justify anything. She actually liked it. And one of the jokes when the FBI agents are coaching Homer about that his last name is Thompson. It's like, I'm gonna stomp on your foot and say hello, Mr. Thompson, and you say hello back. Like, hello, Mr. Thompson. I think he's talking to you. That got my mom. Like, that's one of those jokes that got my mom. And according to the commentary, Conan O'Brien acted out that entire joke in the writer's
Yeah.
room,
Hmm.
which makes me love Conan O'Brien more. So,
Yeah.
and it's a Sideshow Bob episode, which he might be one of my favorite recurring villains too. So,
I mean, yeah, he is the recurring villain,
yeah,
And I mean, just anything that he says always sounds pretentious and hilarious. The Bart, the.
that's right. Well, no one who speaks German should be for all granted. And it's also one of those episodes where it has the HMS Pinafore referenced,
Yeah.
and it's like it's so weird. Like as an adult looking back on The Simpsons and thinking like there are so many things that just go over your head when you're 10 and you're
Hmm.
watching a show like this. You're like, I have no idea who Gilbert and Sullivan are.
Yeah.
It's like, unless I'm a pretentious 10-year-old, which I mean, I was a pretentious 13-year-old, definitely, but 10, I don't know. I don't think I'd quite gotten there yet. But yeah, like to have Sideshow Bob perform the HMS Pinafore on, on this houseboat. I mean, I don't know. It's the height of comedy. I don't know what to tell you. And people will notice I am wearing an Enjoy Slurm. It's Futurama, I know, but I don't have any Simpsons t-shirts, which I know. But it's the same thing essentially. It's just sci-fi. So yeah, like favorite episodes established. We now have a sounding board where we're coming from. Golden Age Simpsons, first generation. Because I mean, I think I asked you this before we had talked a few days ago. What's your impression of like the later seasons of The Simpsons, since you are actually the most caught up?
I mean, I guess I didn't have like much of an impression. I guess that's kind of, I mean, yeah, I can't, there's not really much that I can say. I mean,
Nothing
there are
stands
some
out.
that were nothing that, yeah, kind of really, really stood out to me. I think I was telling you about the Lego episode
Mm-hmm.
um, of The Simpsons, which is kind of, again, kind of one of those wacky episodes that are out there, but it kind of grounds itself in this notion of Homer doesn't want Lisa to grow up so that they can always play together. So it does circle back to the family, and I think that's what I like about The Simpsons, is that at the end of the day they are a family who loves and cares about each other,
Yeah.
despite all the wackiness. I think that's what kind of distinguishes the series from Family Guy, where
Mm-hmm.
it's just a whole bunch of people who don't
Tolerate each other.
yeah, don't seem to enjoy each other or have any redeeming value.
Yeah, I think when we were kind of always talking about The Simpsons, and because there are episodes of Family Guy I still enjoy, and I
Hmm.
don't watch it as much as I used to, but yeah, there's always going to be a good episode or a moment, again, law of big numbers. But with The Simpsons, especially within the era that we're kind of talking about relatively, the family unit was always where you came back to. And like the episodes, especially early on, before we knew that there would be 35 seasons of this program, early on, the relationship between Homer and Marge was always like, there was this threat sometimes of them breaking up, and it could have been, you don't realize as a kid that this is like also a parody of the family sitcom in and of itself, and that everything goes back to status quo at the end of the day. But there was like genuine fear, I think, sometimes that Homer and Marge might not make it as a couple. and then you see like those episodes, like when they first met, and when, right before Bart was born, like all those, they just kind of add to this picture of a loving relationship that's entirely codependent, but at the same time works kind of. Like, whereas like Peter and Lois, it's just kind of like, I guess the sex must be good, because I don't actually understand why you two are still together. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, that's good that they're still trying to stick with the family element to whatever degree that works, because that's kind of the whole reason why The Simpsons as a show, like, I feel like has such a lasting impact, is that at the end of the day, it's still about this family and how they come together or are pushed apart and then come back together again. Because you always believe that Homer and Marge love each other. They love their children. They might not like them very much at times, especially the Homer Bart relationship, but just casual abuse of your son.
Yeah.
Whatever. But yeah, like I think that's what always has been the draw and the appeal at the end of the day. And then it's also like really fucking funny. I mean, that helps, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
So for the purposes of this episode, we are talking about two specific episodes within the golden age of The Simpsons. The first one, I guess chronologically, is Sideshow Bob Roberts. I have it up here. Hold on. I'm just gonna look at this. Yes, Sideshow Bob Roberts is the first of the two. Came out in 1994. I was 10. You were a youngin'.
I was 8.
Yeah, we've established we haven't established yet on the show, but we've established in real life that you are just me 2 years in the past, because that's how this works.
Yeah.
So future Sam. But yeah, so Sideshow Bob Roberts, 1994, is talking about corruption in the government in 1994.
Yeah.
And it's election year. It's nice to know again that we've come so far as a society that an episode of a cartoon from 1994 still feels really relevant.
Yeah, especially the whole contention over an election.
Yep. So broad strokes for this episode, Sideshow Bob calls into a Birch Barlow, who is a parody of the now deceased Rush Limbaugh, may he rot in hell. Basically, he calls into the Birch Barlow show and goes off on a tirade about, I think, his murder charges, and it inspires Birch Barlow to get Bob not exonerated. What's the legal term? Is it exonerated? Gets him out of prison, basically.
Yeah.
Like, basically gets the town people of Springfield to bully Mayor Quimby into releasing Bob from his minimum security prison and let him out. He's then recruited by the local Springfield Republican Party in their appropriate castle on the hill with the lightning and Dracula metaphors and whatnot. And then is recruited to essentially run for mayor of Springfield, because you can just do that whenever you want to, and they can just hold an election. I love how loose the government is in Springfield, by the way. Bob wins by seemingly a landslide. And then Lisa and Bart discover that there has been voter fraud and expose Sideshow Bob for the fraud he is, only to then learn that Mayor Quimby is also super corrupt and that Bob used his own research to figure that out. And everything goes back to the way it was and no one thinks about it ever again. Except when they want to rethink about it in another episode. So I don't know if you've had a chance to watch the episode recently, Cara, or just even in the description of the episode, feelings, thoughts on Sideshow Bob Roberts 30 years later.
Oh man. I mean, I haven't watched it within the last week or so, but you know, it's within those, that golden age of Simpsons that I rewatch a lot. So I am quite familiar with that episode. I mean, it's a solid episode. Not as good as Cape Fear.
No episode is as good as
the Sideshow Bob episode. But it is, it's a good episode. Hilarious that they're going to build a freeway right through the Simpsons house.
Yeah.
And Marge is able to get a bulldozer away with a rolling pin.
Right, the power of the rolling pin.
Yeah.
Especially Marge wielding a rolling pin is just threatening in and of itself.
Yes. And then, it is one of those, the reason why we're talking about this episode is that there is a prominent use of archival records.
The city hall, the records department, where they have I have this on my Twitter banner, the joke, the Hall of Records, the boring kind, not the fun ones. It's like, well played, funny, okay. But it's kind of true. Sometimes the Hall of Records can be boring, but in the case of this episode, actually helps solve the mystery of how Sideshow Bob won the election in the first place. It's one of those episodes when I was putting together all my initial lists of stuff that I wanted to talk about, because I feel like I had to go through some of the episodes previously, because it's like some things don't stick with you as much, and jokes will fly by and you're just kind of like, oh yeah, that was funny. But yeah, when I was going back over, I was like, oh, that's right, they did go to the Hall of Records.
Yeah.
They because there was that one, and I think there was the one where Lisa and Bart are trying to help Krusty reconnect with his father. And Lisa is providing him with Jewish proverbs to basically entice Krusty's rabbi father to forgive his son. And so I think she's in the Hall of Records when she's doing that, or she's in the library, one of those places, probably the library. But I just remember like that sticking, and then also the Lisa the Iconoclast, which we'll get to in a bit, and then Sideshow Bob Roberts being kind of like okay, yeah, there's a few things I can talk about here, just because of the reliance that Lisa and Bart put into it, and then finding the voter rolls and realizing even their beloved Snowball 2 had voted for Bob.
Oh, it's Snowball, not Snowball 2.
Oh, damn. I'm a terrible Simpsons fan. I can't remember anything.
She goes, no, it's personal.
Yeah. It's always when your cat votes posthumously for a terrible man like Sideshow Bob. Yeah, then it's personal. Poor little Snowball. But yeah, and I actually like thinking about like the ending too. I feel like, because when I wrote the article about it, it's interesting like where your mind goes when you're thinking about it from a records management or from an archival point of view. Because at the end, it's basically, yeah, we exposed Sideshow Bob, but also Mayor Quimby is corrupt as hell. And we just kind of accept that. Because hopefully everyone knows that Mayor Quimby is a Kennedy's reference. Diamond Joe Quimby. I don't remember what the title of the episode was, but when Bart goes to the Quimby family reunion,
oh yeah,
with the infamous "shall dare" line, we get to see the Quimby family is essentially the Kennedys, and Mayor Quimby is kind of a sort of a Jack and Bobby reference in that he's a womanizer, he's taking bribes on the regular, he's in with the mob, all that fun stuff about the Kennedy family. I think his wife is even modeled after Jackie O.
Yeah,
pretty heavily. I'm sure there was a Marilyn Monroe thing that happened a while back too. It had to have happened, and if it didn't, then shame on them for not using it. But yeah, so Quimby is like a benign presence in Springfield. He is an ineffective leader, and he's also the Democrat of choice. So weirdly, the Simpsons are both taking it to the Republican Party with their it's really biting satire for its time, commenting on the Republican Party and how like the people want to be ruled. And then also putting them up in like the scary castle of screens, essentially. But then also, and I think in the Republican Party for Springfield, there was like basically a Count Chocula reference. Like, didn't they have? Yeah, they have Count Chocula.
Yeah, they do have.
This is like this vision coming into my head. Like, no, wait, they've got Count Chocula there too. It's not just Mr. Burns. Count Chocula lives there. But then having this like this take on the Democrats is also them going like, yeah, they're not helpful either. I don't know. How does that hit for you now, Cara? How does that hit?
I mean, it's I think it speaks to the writing that they acknowledge that both parties are ineffective. I mean, it's unfortunately more unfortunately true to this day. Kind of the portrayal of the Republican Party to use certain tactics in their campaign and in the voting, and then like the Democrats as ineffective, nothing happening. Is it this episode or one of the other episodes where Sideshow Bob basically says, once a Democrat is voted in, then he and his prison buddies will be out.
I think that might be the same episode. I think that's what he uses to like campaign against Quimby. He's like, look, he let me out. And I kind of love that, like, because Sideshow Bob is such a great, like, again, we've established he's a great villain, because he is so he's so erudite, he's so affable in his own way, but we know, because we're supposed to be on board with Bart and Lisa, that something shady's going down. Like this Juilliard trained clown person who's a stone cold killer and has tried to kill many people. I think up to that point he had attempted to kill Selma. If not, he'd already blamed Krusty for murder. He'd already attempted to kill their Aunt Selma. He had, because this was before Cape Fear. So yeah, I feel like my timeline's correct. So I don't think he's attempted murder on many other people, but I'm sure in prison he's gotten a few pointers from Snake, which was also a favorite part when he starts in Cape Fear, when he starts trying to write his checklist out, or some like
in blood.
In blood, and he faints, and Snake's like, use a pen, Sideshow Bob. I love it. I love it so much.
I also love that at the end of the episode that he has recorded all of his misdeeds of and they are in several volumes that he lays out in the courtroom. So not only is twice over he has been kind of screwed over by archives.
Yep.
So once in the voter rolls that Lisa is able to obtain, even though it's a secret ballot.
Yeah.
And then by his own record keeping of detailing his, he has written this manuscript
Yep.
of, all of his
exploits.
How he became mayor, and he's laying it out.
This is a note to the future. Like, never write your memoirs, kids. Don't do it. Like, someone will inevitably find a way to hold that against you.
Or at least don't do it right after the fact. Probably. If you do something notorious, like maybe wait till you're real old to write that down.
Yeah, wait till you're like practically dead, because then no one's really going to punish you for anything, because they're like, you're already going to die. I mean, what could we possibly do to you?
Like, and maybe not present those records in your trial.
That might be what some would call a bad idea. But who knows? It seems to work for Sideshow Bob. He had a tattoo that basically said he wanted Bart to die and still got out of prison. I mean, still got out on parole. But also that just, again, speaks to the ineffectiveness of Springfield's institutions, not just the government, but already the prison industrial complex sucks. So they're just writing truth to power there. But yeah, God, it's just Sideshow Bob, man. He's got like a wife and kids now. That's weird.
Yeah, I think so.
I do like that they increasingly, as Sideshow Bob went on and became even more of a fan favorite, bringing in basically the entire cast of Frasier.
Yeah.
Because if people don't know, Sideshow Bob is voiced by Kelsey Grammer, who played Frasier Crane on Cheers and the show Frasier. Take that. And then, so eventually in another episode, we were introduced to his brother, which was Miles, I believe. Cedric, that's it.
Cecil, I think.
Cecil. God, what?
Cecil.
Yes, Cecil, you're correct. Cecil, who was voiced by David Hyde Pierce, who played Niles, there we go, in Frasier. And then their father was introduced later on, who was voiced by, oh crap, what was his name? John Mahoney. There we go. The late John Mahoney, who played their father in Frasier, and so played the father of Cecil and Bob. So I love that they did that, like that they worked towards that too, that it wasn't just like, oh, we'll just obviously bring in the full cast of Frasier to play it. It just like was a very like slow build almost towards it. It's such an inside joke in a weird way too. Like you have to know about Frasier. David Hyde Pierce and all. It's just like, I mean, people got it. Some people get it. Like did you ever watch Community?
Not a lot of it.
Okay. It's not important. There's just over 3 seasons, they made a Beetlejuice joke. So season 1, Beetlejuice, season 2, Beetlejuice, season 3, someone says Beetlejuice and you just see a guy in a Beetlejuice outfit walk back. My cousin had to point that out to me too. And I was just like, I didn't, oh my God. It was one of those things. Like I love little jokes like that. And actually I have a book that's still, it's still on my shelf, called Planet Simpson. Which was talking about the golden age of the Simpsons, and essentially like talking about like why it was appointment television at the time, back when appointment TV was still a thing that occurred, when we didn't have these Netflixes and your HBO Pluses and your Disney Pluses. We had to wait till Fox Television at 8:00 at night, at least on the West Coast. And we watched The Simpsons and we were grateful for it. And then we watched all of the subsequent reruns throughout the week.
Yeah.
As children do when they get home from school.
Through commercials.
Yeah. But that was the whole, like, so the book kind of covers a lot of that, and then also gets into this this interesting idea of like, first of all, like how the jokes worked in the show. And one of them that stuck out to me, because this is relevant to Cape Fear, which is not relevant to the archives, but it's relevant to me, so I don't care. But the rake joke, which is one of the more infamous jokes in that entire episode, and is probably one of the reasons why a lot of people like it. Not me. I like it for a lot of other jokes. The rake joke's just cherry on the sundae. But the rake joke itself, the rakes come in 9. So he gets hit 3 times, and then he starts up again, another series of 3 and another series of 3. And the reason it works is that first 3 are funny, next 3 are kind of like, okay, last 3 are hilarious, because everything comes in 3s. And the book itself was talking about, like, in syndication, because commercials are getting longer and they're taking up more space, the joke got edited down. So it's not 9, it's like maybe 5, or maybe a little bit more or less, whatever. So the amount of rakes hitting Sideshow Bob is not the same amount that it was. And so the joke doesn't land the same, because you don't go through that long series of rakes hitting the face. It's like, I mean, Family Guy figured this, everyone figures this formula out. Family Guy took it to the next level, to the point where people are like, we get it. But The Simpsons was so good at picking when those jokes were good, especially at that time. And then so for syndication to kind of like ruin the joke, essentially, for anyone watching it, unless they have the DVDs now, it's almost kind of like, oh, that's unfortunate, because that's a pretty freaking good joke.
Yeah.
I think a similar one is when Apu comes to live with the Simpsons, after they sing the Who Needs the Quickie Mart song. There's supposed to be a whole bit where, so after that, they hear him singing up on the rooftop, and he's like, who needs the Quickie Mart? I do. And a lot of the times now in syndication, they cut after that. There's supposed to be a line after where they cut back to Homer, and he's like, he lied to us through song. I hate that. Like, you have to watch the DVDs for that or maybe on Disney Plus now. I don't know if they've kept the whole original edit.
Yeah, now I think it's the original edit.
Okay, well, that's good. That makes me feel better.
Yeah, it's not the pared down for syndication. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. I feel better now, because be like raging about jokes that don't exist to people anymore. Which, getting closer to 40 now, so I'm in that age bracket where I'd be doing that. You'll know someday, Cara. You'll know.
While yelling at kids to get off your lawn.
Yep, I'm going to start yelling at clouds. It's going to happen. I will become an Abraham Simpson meme someday. I mean, that's kind of the goal, though. To live as long as Grandpa Simpson and to be a cloud yeller. Yeah. I feel like that's just my destiny. Getting back on topic, which I'm so good at. Do you feel like there's anything else about Sideshow Bob Roberts that, whether they're archives related, records management, just general Simpsons knowledge, that we haven't talked about that you'd like to?
Yeah, I think from an archivist perspective, it's kind of funny that the lack of security for what should be restricted records is what solves which rights the wrong, like too wrong, like a wrong made a right.
Yeah, that's how that works. Although it's really weird that the records themselves, while functional to, like, okay, they exposed Bob, also exposed Mayor Quimby, but then it's like, after that, it's like, okay, nothing really happens afterwards. I mean, Bob isn't mayor anymore, but Quimby still is, and he's still ineffectual. Like, no one cares about that part. It's like, oh yeah, he's corrupt, but we accept this as that's just Quimby, and he's better for us than Bob, I guess. And thank you, records, for proving that. it's a strange message. I mean, because I know that a lot of the times this is just going for the joke. And, you know, the wrapping up is kind of like, okay, we know we're going back to status quo. That's just kind of the name of the game. But it's interesting, like when you look at it from the perspective of someone who sees the importance of records like that, especially like what Lisa and Bart just did, and also what Bob found out about Mayor Quimby, you would think in 1994 that would be, you know, more revelatory than anything else. But no, it's just like, okay, we're just gonna go back to the way it is. The records are there, they did their job, and we're moving on with life. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. It was just, it's these weird observations you make now when you're older and have a professional perspective. Well, okay, so let's move on to Lisa the Iconoclast, which was, I think, came out 2 years later, 1996. Let me check real quick. Oh, I wrote this one for you. This was 1996. I have a note because on the actual article in question that I wrote, because I wrote the one for Sideshow Bob Roberts essentially like after the 2020 election or during the 2020 election, because it seemed relevant. I don't know. And then I wrote the one about Lisa the Iconoclast because we realized we had been friends for over a decade, and I was just like, what even the hell is that? So there's a little note at the top like, for Cara. Let no one ever think that I don't get sentimental. So yeah, this aired in 1996 originally. So I'm 12 now, you're 10, as we've now established in this timeline. And Lisa the Iconoclast is essentially a revelation about the origins of Jebediah Springfield, aka Hans Sprungfeld, a notorious pirate. So it's basically like Jebediah Springfield Day in Springfield, who is the founder of the town of Springfield in the state of whatever. According to the VH1 episode, it's Northern Kentucky, but who knows? They might have changed it by now. If anyone remembers those old VH1 behind the scenes. So Lisa is researching a report on Jebediah Springfield, and she goes to the Springfield Historical Society, where she runs into, and I'm going to forget this man's name. What is your name, sir? I remember who he's voiced by, but I don't remember the character. There we go. Hollis Hurlbut. That's weird to say out loud, but I'm going to do it. Hollis Hurlbut, voiced by Donald Sutherland, who has dedicated his life to the study of Jebediah Springfield in every scholarly way, and leaves Lisa alone for a untold amount of minutes, where she, I think, opens a recorder, or is it a scroll, something like that.
It's a pipe, or the pipe,
yeah, a little
whatever.
Yeah. So she opens up the little casing, and out pops a piece of canvas, and on the back of that is written the confessions of Hans Sprungfeld about his true origins after he tried to assassinate George Washington. And it's a long diatribe from Hans Sprungfeld that even includes the laughing at the end, which I adore because I love a good villain laugh. And then when they just cut to Lisa going, ha 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 ha. Love it. Lisa then goes on a spree of trying to convince people of Jebediah Springfield's true origins, to let them know that he's not the benevolent benefactor and founder that people assumed he was, and the entire town of Springfield basically hates her. And she tries to prove it by having the body of Jebediah Springfield exhumed, because he notoriously would, as Hans Sprungfeld, had a silver tongue because it got bitten off by, I don't remember who, but it got bitten off at some point. So you should still have the silver tongue in the grave because that wouldn't degrade over time, supposedly. I think silver does degrade over time, but I'm not a preservation expert, nor am I a metallurgist. I don't know. But one assumes the body is exhumed and there's no tongue. And so Lisa believes that she's wrong for about 5 seconds. And then she goes back to the museum and finds the silver tongue in one of the dioramas. And Hollis Hulbert basically knows that she's right, but didn't want to let down the city of Springfield, essentially. And also he had devoted his entire life to a lie. On an academic level, that's what we call a whoopsie. They then resolve to go and tell the people of Springfield, but at the last minute, Lisa decides not to, because the comfort of the lie of Jebediah Springfield is in fact more powerful than the truth about this dead white man. And thus we end the episode there.
Yeah, I guess this one did not age well. I mean, like everything up until the very end, like feels like this could be a relevant episode to today until that last part.
Yeah. Oh, it's this like, especially it's weird that the Simpsons end up using Lisa in this way a lot. Like even in the golden age, like Lisa became, for people in our generation, this voice of the minority, the underdog, you know, the unwanted, or, you know, kind of every underdog tale you could think of, Lisa kind of represented in a weird way, because she was socially active. And, you know, the episode where she becomes a vegan, and while no one has to become a vegan, but she champions it in ways that are very familiar to a lot of people who are in kind of groups, you know, protest groups, social justice groups, and the like. But over the years, they've also used Lisa as this weird sounding board for the status quo at the same time, which is odd because it's so incongruous with who she is and the like, kind of like the cultural perception of her. The best example I have really for that argument is after Hari Kondabolu came out with his, I hope I pronounced his last name correctly, he had a documentary called The Problem with Apu, where he's basically talking about the influence that Apu, as the most prominent Indian character for a long time in mainstream television, followed him as a man of Indian origin, Indian descent, in a negative way. Like and he interviews a lot of Southeast Asian actors, comedians, activists, asking them about what the influence on their lives has been with Apu as kind of like hanging over them. And he's not like outright attacking the Simpsons or being all like that Hank Azaria is a terrible person, and because he voices Apu, for those who don't know. But he's basically saying that this stereotype, which is Hank Azaria's impression of what's his name? Oh, he's the Pink Panther actor. Oh, what is it? Oh God, that's gonna kill me. What's his name? Inspector Clouseau. Who are you? Pink Panther. I'm not even gonna edit this out. Actor. Oof. What was it? Peter Sellers. There we go. Oh, that was rough. I used to know that name really well because I used to watch the Pink Panther movies as a kid with my parents. So Hank Azaria is doing an impression of Peter Sellers' impression of an Indian man from a previous movie, which is still all kinds of messed up. That's brown face being treated as, like something to be celebrated in this voice of an Indian man. And so the documentary itself is just kind of examining that impact of Apu. And there are some notable ones like Hassan Minhaj has basically, I think he No, it wasn't Hassan Minaj. It was Kel Penn. That's it. Kel Penn never watched The Simpsons because of Apu. Like he's just like, I actively don't like it because of that depiction. And everyone's within their right to like or dislike The Simpsons for whatever reasons. And it's impactful on people for whatever reason that they choose to enjoy it or, rail against it. But the documentary itself is not like an outright attack. It's just like pointing out something. And then in The Simpsons, they address this with, I think it had something to do with like some kind of property that Lisa was previously into. And then it turns out there was something bad about it. And she was trying to change that. And she's asking Marge about it. And Marge is kind of like giving her a little bit of a speech, as Marge would do to her daughter, and just being like, well, some things, are just the way that they are and they don't always change. We just have to kind of accept them for what it is. And then for some reason, Lisa has a picture of Apu on her dresser that is prominently featured in the shot. And Lisa's just like, yeah, I guess, well, some things just don't, change, or they just kind of stay the way that they are, blah, 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 which is a direct commentary. And they're utilizing Lisa's voice to get that message across, which it's just kind of like, oh, this isn't a good idea, guys. I don't think it's going to work the way you think it works. I don't know, were you aware of any of that stuff happening? Or, I mean, am I just kind of like talking to the peanut gallery?
No, I mean, I guess it's more understandable in, was it 1996 that, this is how they're portraying Jebediah Springfield, or promoting the myth.
Yeah.
A little bit more understandable that that's a spin that they would take. The fact that, I think the episode you're referring to recently about Apu, Marge is kind of trying to, what is it? She's reading something like A Secret Garden or something like that, and is like removing like all the racist references,
actively taking out the problematic material.
Yeah. Which is kind of one thing to talk about literature that was created as a product of its time, as opposed to, a TV series which has gone on for 30 plus years and is kind of, it changes with the times.
Yeah.
It's not a static thing. It's whereas a piece of literature, is, unless, new editions are come out, but it is not. The TV show is a product of the present.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like for a show that has gone on for so long to stick to this stereotype of an Indian voice is problematic in and of itself. So then for them to address it within the show in the way that they did, and to utilize the one member of the family who this, like, by all accounts, this wouldn't stick with, is just kind of like, oh, that's a poor move. That's not good. And I think I remember like a lot of articles even coming out about Lisa as the wrong character to make that point with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which is all just kind of going back to saying that, Lisa's decision at the end of that episode, from the perspective of two adults, again, 30 years later, who have also gone through, the regimen of historical analysis and, what does Miss Hoover talk about? Like, dead white man bashing from a PC thug.
Yeah. You're the reason why the rest of us can't get husbands.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. That one hits too. Cause it's replaced that with social justice warrior in the last decade. And the episode is essentially talking about the same thing, where this idea of feminism and historical scholarship making you feel uncomfortable with the fact that the past was kind of sucky for literally anyone who isn't a white man and of the landed gentry. It all works up until that last moment when Lisa caves, basically, and just goes, no, the spirit of Jebediah Springfield, the myth of Jebediah is better in the long run for everybody. Like, no, it isn't actually.
Yeah.
Also, Hans Sprungfeld is a much more interesting person. So
yeah. I mean, really, myths kind of, they stop us from thinking about these historical figures as complicated people. They're not mythical beings who are perfect, and by kind of glossing over their faults, then we continue to silence the people who they harmed. And in cases, the people who they harmed and owned.
Yep. Like, and yeah, because it's interesting, like, because this also is taking place basically during the American Revolution. Like, this is and so for historical background, for anyone who doesn't know, that's my time period of choice. My bachelor's degree was basically, my emphasis was in American history, specifically the Revolution through the ratification of the Constitution. So all of Hamilton is my area of study. And up until Hamilton, you didn't get a lot of really Revolutionary War content out there, because it wasn't as fancy a war, I guess, as World War I and World War II, or mostly World War II. So this episode has a lot of my favorite history jokes, because it's going after George Washington, who is my problematic fave of the founding fathers, and has my favorite Revolutionary War joke ever, which is because Lisa has a dream / vision of George Washington.
Like you do,
as we all have experienced. It's universal, quite frankly. Tell me in the comments if you also had a dream about George Washington. But yeah, she has a dream about George Washington, who's basically encouraging her to to tell the truth, cannot tell a lie, and she's like, but what if I I don't know if I should, and blah blah blah, and he's like, we had cowards in the Revolution too, we called them Kentuckians. It's like, I apologize to Kentucky, but it's still a funny joke. I enjoy it. And then he's like, what if I go and tell Janie, Janie down the street about, she could be president one day. She's like, no, she'll fill the Senate with boys. And then also Bart hears her crying out in her sleep, no, George Washington, let me help you. It's like, even your dreams are dumb or nerdy or, uncool. Something like that. One of my favorite sequences from a historical point of view, because purely from a historical point. But no, it's just, like what you were saying is absolutely true. Like, when you gloss over the historical importance of looking at people not just as these mythological characters, as we often do. I mean, the founding fathers are a perfect example of that. They can still have done great things, but still have been pieces of shit. We know this already, like Thomas Jefferson. Y'all know what Thomas Jefferson did. And he still wrote the Declaration of Independence. Great document. I studied it personally. I got to look at it in the rotunda one time. It was great, but he was a piece of shit. And we have to know these things, because I mean, the thing about history is that you're supposed to learn from it. We're doing a really crappy job of that right now. We have been for some time. But that is supposed to give you the lessons to learn to make society better, to further your education, to give you a better idea of how to criticize and analyze and interrogate documentation, and even the media that you watch. This is a perfect example. Who else but us would interrogate a Simpsons episode, 2 of them from the mid 90s, to talk about how they affect history and record keeping and archives? Only us. Your education is important. This is that example to. But I guess we should also get into the Hollis Holbert side of things, because again, he devoted his entire life to a lie, which again, academically, we call this a whoopsie, but also not unheard of. I mean, this is a lot of historians, especially in the like early 20th century and beyond, kind of figuring out that the people that you lionized were not, in fact, great people personally.
Yeah, I guess he's an unfortunate representation of people in our field. I guess he's more of a museum or more of a curator than
kind of everything, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that is kind of the position that a lot of people of like small historical societies, they're often the the museum curator, the archivist, the librarian, the person who punches your ticket.
Do you validate parking?
But it the hiding of like a historical record, of a historical artifact, I mean, these are the type of things that sow distrust in archives and historical or cultural institutions, that we're presenting a certain type of history that we're putting forth. I think museums tend to get that a lot more, since they're actually like crafting a narrative. But in archives, I think we do get accused of like we're hiding records, or records are restricted for nefarious reasons and not because your social security number is on that, or somebody's social security number is on that. I'm not going to show it to you.
There's redacted information that you actually shouldn't be allowed to see ever.
It's like not all information should be shared immediately. And so, I mean, he's an unfortunate portrayal of somebody in our field. Even though he does come around. But yeah.
I mean, if anything, he could have benefited from the discovery more than anything else, because a lot of people do that all the time. They discover something, and then they write a book about it, and then they go on an academic book tour and make millions, I assume.
Well, I guess in this case, like the document was literally discovered, like it was hidden in an item.
True.
So I guess I will give him give Lisa the discovered the record.
Yeah, she
was not in a folder that was listed in a finding aid available online to everybody.
And had been for some time before a historian came in and discovered it in the box that was labeled properly and put online. Yeah, it's one of those things, like, especially in what I found in like writing these articles and then in talking to people about these different pieces of media, is that, these portrayals of archivists or record keeping practices, or even just like the space in which the archiving occurs, is so, because it's obvious the creators don't know what the difference is between like a library or an archives or a museum. They kind of get folded in together. The Historical Society is just kind of the most succinct version of that, especially in real life, because that often ends up being the case. But in the case of The Simpsons, it's like No, that's actually fairly accurate in terms of what he would be doing for the most part, other than the hopefully not the stealing of artifacts and hiding them from the general public. But because so many people who then utilize our profession or our work within a show or a property of some sort get it wrong or confuse it with something else, that the mistrust that then is built through like historical discoveries, or when something is stolen, or we are accused of doing something bad or nefarious. Sometimes we should rightly be called on it, and other times it's just kind of like, okay, everyone needs to calm down now. But because there is so little knowledge of what we do, and even the archival profession has a hard time kind of penetrating that barrier, then you end up with these stereotypes, with these visions of what an archives is and is not, and then also that distrust keeps getting built up and built up and built up, and especially because in these properties you only get like one look at it. Like, you don't have a consistent like archivist character on The Simpsons who comes in and is like, no, Bart and Lisa, you don't understand. There's this thing called the right to be forgotten. I need to tell you about it, and we're going to learn about that one today. Let's talk about a dark archives. It sounds cool, but it isn't.
It's really not.
Yeah, it's kind of the bad version. So yeah, it's so strange, like when you really kind of like put this image together of like how pop culture depicts our profession, and us as professionals. There we go, I can talk. You get this very skewed picture of people who either don't know what they're doing, or they do know what they're doing and they're just doing bad things. So that's fun.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of compare the two episodes. Whereas the first one we were talking about, archival records, helps to solve the mystery and, bring Bob to justice. Whereas this one, well, we could argue about whether or not the confession can be considered an archival record because it was not stored in archives with, documented provenance.
Sure.
All that aside.
We have a lot of things in this.
Yeah, that's too nerdy. We
Have you met us? I don't know.
Yeah, but in this episode, you see the suppression of a record to suppress the truth and to continue a lie, which, while it's framed as a good thing, it's ultimately a harmful thing.
Yeah.
It's have you ever read that book, Lies My Teacher Told Me?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, like that would be an entry of chapter in that book.
Lies My Teacher Told Me. They also did not tell me about Hans Sprungfeld, notorious pirate.
Which would be way more interesting.
Yeah. I feel like a town founded by a pirate would actually be celebrated. Even if he tried to assassinate George Washington, that's still a claim to fame, guys. I don't know about you, but privateers get celebrated all the time. There's a whole show called Our Flag Means Death, which is celebrating piracy. So I feel like we could either do a follow-up episode and really just kind of talk about how Hans Sprungfeld is a hero, and we should all value him as we're going to do some revisionist history here. We're going to expose the lie, and we're going to write a scholarly paper about this that will be peer-reviewed with proper citations. It's going to be great. It's going to be great, guys. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there, unless there is anything else about the episode that you're just itching to tell people, or of anything.
No, I think we covered it pretty well. We will argue about whether or not the confession is an archival record or not later.
We'll do that on Twitter at some point. just feel like, oh, heated argument. I personally don't care at this point. It's from 1996. I don't care. But yeah, Cara, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it was bound to happen. It was inevitable.
Yes.
Because we are friends, and it's just like, if I hadn't, I think you probably would have gotten on a plane and come to murder me at some point.
Might have.
Yeah, that's why we're friends. Put me on your show. Like, you're the aunt of my daughter. How dare you not? But yeah, of course, I appreciate you coming on and being my friend and everything. And should people desire to follow you on social media, where would they perhaps find you?
I'm on Twitter at Mini Archivist, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the least online of like any of us. So yeah, well, yeah. And as always, you can follow me at darling_Sammy, SAMMY. You can go to Pop Archives, POP-archives. I should spell it archives, ARCHIVES.com. I realized the other day I spelled pop for some reason, but didn't spell archives, which is arguably the one word that I should be spelling.
I think so, yeah.
I'm weird. I don't know. Poparchives.com. Go check out the articles, especially the ones for Sideshow Bob Roberts and Lisa the Iconoclast that inspired this episode. You can also like and subscribe this video. You can like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm good at what I do. And yeah, if there's any property you would like to suggest that I, myself, or other guests, which will inevitably be Cara at some point again, talk about, it's going to happen. Please leave a comment or email me at popculturearchives.com@gmail.com. Again, with the links, Samantha. And you can suggest something and I'll add it to the list. Okay, I'm going to stop because we're both tired and I'm clearly punch drunk at this point. I don't know what's happening. All right, for me and Cara, bye everyone.